I'm Lauren Green for FoxNews.com. One of Donald Trump's top campaign promises included a $1 trillion program to rebuild our country's crumbling highways, tunnels, bridges, and airports. According to his website, one of the ways he plans to do it is, quote, leverage new revenues and work with financing authorities, public-private partnerships, and other prudent funding opportunities. Well, what exactly is a public-private partnership, and do they actually work? And joining me now is Mary Ann Schmidt-Carey, the president of Say Yes to Education and the architect of its citywide turnaround strategy that builds public-private partnerships across the nation to improve education in low-income areas. Welcome.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be here.
So, Mary Ann, how do public-private partnerships actually work?
Well, there's not a lot of mystery around it. The big idea is to be able to bring together both the public sector with the private sector and really drive much more efficient and effective use of all capital tied to seeking to achieve very measurable outcome goals and really delivering quality products and services to the public.
You know, one of the criticisms, and I'm sure there'll be several criticisms for the program, but one of the practical things is that private sector companies, they're about making profit. How do you make the public and private partnership work when one really is about profitability and the other is really trying to build something, the infrastructure, which is not really a profit-making organization?
So what we have learned through the public-private partnerships that we've developed is you have to start by having real clarity and shared commitment to the outcome objectives that are across all different parts of our society are agreed to be meaningful outcomes that make a difference and drive better productivity. In our case, being able to do that required not only bringing all of the different partners to the table, the different parts of government, private sector, and it's important to realize that the private sector is not this monolithic thing. There are corporations, there are foundations,
there are people,
there are high net worth individuals.
Okay.
Lots of people can come together to co-invest in driving improvement in America, and we have found that there's a lot of willingness to put private capital towards public good. What's really critical is that you have data systems and transparency that people really trust. So you bring people to a common table. You have to have clarity about the outcome you're trying to achieve and that it's measurable.
Right.
You have to have data systems with lots of transparency. And in our case, we found that when you create an honest broker that helps to really facilitate those conversations and collaborative action, that really helps to overcome maybe some of the fears or suspicions.
What advice would you give the Trump administration in pursuing the public-private sector, public-private partnerships? Because one of the criticisms, again, has been oversight. How do you create these partnerships, and who oversees them?
So from our experience, I think first and foremost, they need to really understand that the three indispensable pillars to an effective public-private partnership is having quality data systems, transparency, and really a commitment to govern in a more collaborative way. I think they have to understand and incentivize and build capacity for this type of honest broker function to take place. And again, that focused on very clear, measurable outcomes and the ability to really work together to coordinate and braid the different parts of public and private dollars towards the long-term objective. And let me just give you an example, because we, Say Yes to Education, has been involved in this work really for 30 years.
Okay.
In the first 2 decades of our work, we invested private capital really more in an R&D mode. We were focused on the goal of enabling every child that we work with to achieve a post-secondary degree.
Okay.
So we had real clarity about that goal. And then we used private capital to test different strategies to understand what the barriers were and effective ways to overcome those barriers. In the last decade, when we were able to see that really there were just common sense interventions that could drive these great outcomes regardless of whether or not kids were born into poverty and with other challenges, we actually shifted how we use private capital, and now we've been driving the use of private capital to incentivize government to align its capital so you can scale and sustain those programs that work for young people.
You know, I'm thinking about that. When a private sector company comes into a venture like this, they understand that it's a long-term goal. Education is not a profit. They're not going to see a profit on their balance sheet in a year or something. This is about long-term training a generation to be more productive citizens, and that's a long-term goal. And they go into it with that. With something like a country's infrastructure, this is about business, and they expect to see some kind of profit right away or within a reasonable amount of time. So these kind of tax breaks they'll probably get, and those other things. This is part of the criticism that really it's about private sector profits. How can you guard against this sort of turning the federal infrastructure, program really into a money-making operation for the private sector?
So a couple of things come to mind. Whether you're talking about the physical infrastructure of the country or the human capital infrastructure of the country, because both of those have to be developed.
Right.
And you're talking about bringing public and private partners to the table. There really does need to be shared commitment to a larger goal, whether or not our country continues to prosper and grow, whether or not we have a workforce that's really prepared for the industries that are evolving and developing in the decades to come going forward.
Right.
So I think even private partners, and our experience has been, because we work with a lot of corporations and other entities that do have different bottom line incentives, but there is still this overarching understanding and commitment that we have a shared set of values and commitments and opportunities to foster the betterment of our country. So I do believe when the conversations are structured, they can't just be around being able to create a profit motive for companies.
Right. What do we get out of this?
So partner selection matters, and that's something Say Yes to Education has learned an awful lot about in the last 10 years. Our work has really been to create the incentive to get individuals to come to a common table, but to share a commitment to a big idea.
Yeah.
Every child in this country has the capacity, the internal capacity to achieve a post-secondary degree and to become a productive citizen, but it really does require that both public and private partners understand the investment strategy that starts when they're born and doesn't finish until they get a degree, whether it's vocational certification or a bachelor's degree that allows them to become a productive citizen. In infrastructure, we really do have to align vision and commitment to larger objectives, but there are financial ways to be able to also help to ensure that the private sector can create profits and be able to continue to invest for the future.
Okay. I want to thank you so much, Marianne Schmidt-Carey, for being here. It's Say Yes to Education. Maybe the Trump administration will give you a call and give some advice.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
Thanks so much. And we will continue to take the conversation further here on VoxNews.com. I'm Lauren Green.